If God was making a movie of his relationship with us, what would it look like? Hi, I'm Paul, and today we're going to be dealing with one of the theological hot potatoes called predestination. Naturally, this is a very complex issue. There's a lot of subtleties, but we're going to be focusing on the three major views and seeing what distinguishes them and what emphasis each view has. Basically, there are three principal ways of looking at predestination: Calvinism, Arminianism, and Open Theism. We're going to use the metaphor of filmmaking to explore these options. I have my own preference, and later on my views will be interrogated, so hang in there, especially if your views are being challenged. I'm happy for you to stick with whatever view you think is most biblical, but let's at least hear the various options before hitting the stop button. Our first metaphor deals with Calvinism. In our first metaphor, we see God as a filmmaker who knows exactly how he wants every scene to play out. Every line of dialogue is written, and every movement of the actor is precisely planned out. There is no room for improvisation, and the director's say is final, as he controls every aspect of the filmmaking process. And now, the movie is complete. God, the filmmaker, can fast forward and rewind to any scene he wishes, because he exists outside of the story's timeline. This picture reflects the Calvinist position. God exists outside of time, and so can know absolutely every detail of history, past, present, and future. The Calvinist version emphasizes that it is God who chooses men's destinies and realities. Man's will is submerged in the will of God, and so every aspect of human history is by God's design and initiation. They often refer to scriptures like, "You did not choose me, but I chose you," or "Many are invited, but few are chosen." Our second metaphor is to see God as a filmmaker who is making a documentary. He knows what he wants his film to be about. He knows how it must end, but he works with people in the film, allowing them to express their own views and making their own decisions. As the director, he simply guides the process by influencing the players, but never forces them to say or do anything. The film ends up being a collaboration between the players, who are given room to have their own voice, and the director, who shapes the story. Again, the film is complete, and the director can scroll forward and back through the scenes as he stands outside of the timeline of his movie. This image reflects the Arminian position. Once again, God has absolute knowledge of past, present, and future. The difference here is that the emphasis is on man's choice, in other words, free will. Man can make his own decisions, and although God knows exactly what those decisions will be, he does not forcibly control those decisions. So the Arminian likes to use scriptures like, "God so loved the world that whosoever believes," or "Today I put before you blessings and cursings, so choose life." When seen from this perspective of predestination, God's plans are based on his knowledge of the future. He knows exactly what will happen, and so his plans, made before creation, incorporate these free decisions. Our third metaphor is seeing God as a father making a home video. He records his relationship with his children as it happens. The movie is made entirely interactively, with the father anticipating but not knowing perfectly what the child will plan to do next. He sits with the remote at each phase of the filmmaking process, reflecting on the past and imagining the future. He is the filmmaker who delights in the creative participation of his children, steering his family through an uncharted future towards a desired happy ending. But this doesn't mean that the father himself makes no plans. He is, after all, the dad. What we need to ask is, firstly, when does he make these plans? And secondly, what is the nature of these plans? As to when, some plans are made long in advance, like planning to send his children to university. Others can be more spontaneous, like taking them for ice cream on a hot day. Here, the father lives with his family, bringing love and discipline when necessary, but at the same time acknowledging the right of the family to make choices. This image reflects the view of the open theist. In this view, the future is not knowable, and so is not complete. It is similar to the Arminian in that it acknowledges man's free will, but different in that everything happens in real time. And so history is a co-creation of God and man. The open theist use scriptures like where God thought Israel would return to them, but they did not. or where he tests Hezekiah to know what is in his heart, or where he uses words like perhaps in the prophetic, perhaps this will happen, or perhaps it will not. At this point, you might be saying, wait a minute, surely God knows the future. Surely, by definition, God knows the future. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Right now, we're just painting some broad brushstrokes of the different views. So let's look at the plans of God through the three lenses of Calvinism, Arminianism, and Open Theism. In Calvinism, the future is settled and God's plans are scripted and enforced. In Arminianism, the future is settled and man's choices, being known beforehand, are included in God's script. In Open Theism, the future is open and the script is being co-written in real time. Naturally, each of these positions has pros and cons, and we need to look at the scriptures to determine what is correct and what isn't. But before we go into the scriptures, there are also ethical issues to bear in mind. For the Calvinist, free will is ultimately an illusion, which goes against most of what we experience ourselves. Not only that, if the entirety of human history is by God's design, God is the designer of genocide, rape, murder, and other dark aspects of our lives. For the Arminian, who embraces human free will, the ethical challenge is less so, because man can now be fully responsible being who makes his own bed and now must lie in it. But the ethical problem remains, in that if God had seen all the evil in human history with so much pain and anguish, why would he start the project in the first place? Does God so enjoy the praise of the few that he has prepared for so many billions to suffer?